Hello, everybody, to our first interview in the year 2024. It's an interview, of course, in the frame of our CESI Talks series, which is part of our WEP24 project, which aims at raising awareness of our members and the affiliates and citizens at large for the upcoming European elections. And today I have the particularly honored to welcome José Gusmão from Portugal, member of the European Parliament, member of the group GUE NGL, the left, and a very important vice chair of the Committee on Economic and Monetary Affairs, member, among others, of the Subcommittee on Tax Matters, and substitute member, was very important, also of the Employment and Social Affairs Committee in the European Parliament. Mr. Gusmão, welcome.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Mr. Gusmão, you've had quite an intensive 3 or 4 past years, also now as vice chair of the Economic and Monetary Affairs Committee. What were the big files in the past mandate, and what are the files which are still to come in this 6 months or maybe beyond? Also, the elections in June. What will be the most important files according to you?
Well, we had several files in the area of labor rights. Unfortunately, there is a common thread in all of those files, which is the Commission and some of the political groups' position that since these are matters of national competence, the European Union cannot even establish some minimum levels of rights in those areas. And I mean, I had, as a rapporteur, I had the internships file, I had the right to disconnect file. I also was following very closely the file on platform work, and I was main rapporteur in one of the employment guidelines file, which was very strong on the issue of collective bargaining. And I think more than improving some of these files or dealing with other issues that we have on labor rights in the European Union, we have to establish some kind of perspective on what is the European Union supposed to do when it comes to labor rights. Because what I feel is that the Commission was never shy about establishing recommendations in putting pressure on member states to deregulate their labor markets, arguing that this was more efficient and would lead to higher wages. Well, we know for a fact that this is not true, and as has actually been acknowledged by the European Central Bank when it said that the decline in collective bargaining coverage has led to less upward movement in wages, and even in times of growth. And this should be a concern of the European Union, also because the European Union had big responsibilities in the overall trends towards labor market and labor law deregulation. So I think we should try and agree on a set of minimums for labor rights in all European Union countries. And because what we've been having are files that are mostly resolutions written as law. What I mean by this is that even when we have files that are directives or regulations, those are very indicative and they're not really creating hard law protecting labor. We still have one file that I hope will be debated in this mandate, which is the right to disconnect. Unfortunately, it was discussed in the beginning of the mandate, but at the very last minute, there was an agreement between the right and the socialist rapporteur to introduce a 3-year period to have negotiation between the stakeholders. And as we warned at that time, employers would certainly use that period to block this process. And that's exactly what happened. Employers, I think, were negotiating in bad faith. We ended up with no agreement between the stakeholders. And we are now in a very concrete danger having no file on the right to disconnect before the end of the mandate, and of course after the end of the mandate, all bets are off. We don't know what the majority in Parliament will be. We don't know if we'll have the same support for a file, which I think, although not too close from what we would prefer, was still a pretty good compromise. And I think that this is the major issue when it comes to labor law in the past few years. The European Commission is very quick to issue recommendations on member states to deregulate labor markets. And those recommendations have real effects, and they will have even higher effects now that the Commission is trying to tie the European semester recommendations to the economic governance rules, and this way putting extra pressure on member states to comply with those recommendations, and then very slow and very timid when it comes to protecting labor rights in its own European law. I'm sorry if I wasn't very short, but this is
no, very good. I was just also about to ask about the agreement which has been obviously found regarding the proposed directive on platform work. What is your assessment? How will the file continue, or what do you think? What the compromise reached, is that a good compromise? What is your opinion on that?
Well, I mean, it's always difficult to see how this is going to play out in member states. I should say that in Portugal, the impact was immediate, because basically there was a negotiation between our party and the Socialist Party in Portugal, which was following very closely the debate on the directive. And I think that the end result was pretty good. And we're already having specific cases in Portugal of companies with platform work, namely Uber, that are being called upon in courts to comply with the principle of treating their workers as dependent workers. I think that for the same reasons that I was just mentioning about other files, it will be a matter of also political will at the national level. But I think the platform work directive created a favorable framework for member states that want to bring platform companies into compliance with the principle of treating their workers as what they are, workers that have a dependent relationship with the company. So I think that again, it wasn't exactly the file that we would have liked to have produced, but it will certainly give an interesting push for labor law in member states. Now we'll see how the implementation goes at the national level.
So Gusmão, you have been very, very active also when it comes, you mentioned it earlier, also the economic governance framework and the budgetary surveillance and the Stability and Growth Pact. The Commission has proposed a review or revision of it, and the Council, as it seems, is having hard times to find an agreement. How do you see this file evolving? What are the dangers here?
Well, I think there are several things that concern me in the economic governance file. I voted against it in the European Parliament. I'm extremely concerned with the end result of the negotiations. I think there are several problems. The first one is that one of the criticisms was that the old rules were too complex and had no real national ownership. And I think both of these issues just became worse. Now we have even more complicated files. We have numerical benchmarks on the one hand, but then we have a ridiculous level of discretion by the European Commission to impose trajectories on the member states, even if those member states are proposing trajectories that comply with the benchmarks. So we have benchmarks, but we also have an unprecedented level of European Commission discretion on the decisions that go into economic governance. And also, I think that the option to make the primary expenditure indicator the main indicator for the reference trajectory is a very ideologically biased solution. And it cannot be justified on the basis of public account sustainability, because what we know is that public account sustainability is dependent on the public balance and not just public expenditure. And what is happening now is that these rules will create a structural bias towards austerity policies, because the reference trajectory will be designed on the basis of expenditure alone. And this means that member states will be pressured to cut on expenditure. And this means cutting on public services, cutting on healthcare, education, culture, and so on. And it also means that the member states will be pressured to follow contractionary economic and budgetary policies. And this means policies that we know are ineffective on all counts, including public finances sustainability. We know that from the Troika programs, when we had expenditure slashing programs that ended up with recessions and rising unemployment, but also, last but not least, an increase in public debt in the countries where these policies were applied. So we know that cutting expenditure to reduce debts is a self-defeating strategy, but the Parliament is now designing a set of rules that we fear very much will lead to the same kind of recipe for member states. And I think the issue of ownership is a really serious one. The propaganda of the Commission saying that these rules will allow for more democratic and national ownership are just false advertising of the most shameless type. The fact of the matter is that even if a member state presents a reference trajectory that complies with the already very stringent numerical benchmarks that are present in the rules that are being discussed, the European Commission can still force that member state into another reference trajectory with austerity measures. And I think this is a very serious matter that will have a very deep impact on economic policy and levels of employment and the member states' ability to develop economies based on higher wages and more qualified employment and so on.
Mr. Gusmão, this year in June we will have elections, the European elections. What is your message to the citizens? What is the message to potential voters in this regard?
Well, I think that there are two ideas that are very important to confront all political parties with. One idea is the idea that the European pillar of social rights has to be something that creates actual law. And what we've been seeing, both by the political right in Parliament and by the European Commission, is the idea that the set of files that are being created by the European Pillar of Social Rights are mostly about very soft recommendations. I've talked a little bit about the labor law files, but I could say the same thing about other files where I was rapporteur, such as the mental health file, the care report, and others that are mostly about recommending stuff to the member states and not about creating real social and labor rights in the European Union. And that's what I think we need to do. It's not about taking social policy away from member states. It's about understanding that labor and social rights are fundamental rights in the European Union. So we need to have minimum levels of protection that are common to all member states, even for reasons of fair competition. It's very amazing to me that the European Commission will be so committed to fair competition rules when it comes to discussing the internal market. But when it comes to discussing social and labor dumping, as we see in many countries in the European Union, fair competition is no longer an issue. It seems like it's only an issue when we're discussing national policies that are geared towards protecting certain levels of certain sectors of a national economy. But when it comes, for instance, to taxation or to protecting labor rights or social rights, fair competition is no longer an issue. And I think this is something that all political parties should be called upon. The second issue, I think, is economic governance. I don't know if we're going to have this file wrapped up before elections, but I think in the next few months, political parties and national governments should be strongly pressured by citizens not to allow that, for instance, the Parliament agreement is approved, and I think. The fact that we have an impasse in council, if it remains, should be something that gives us hope that we can still change this deal. We've been having reports that France is going to cave. It has already caved, but until the file is finally approved, there is still time to prevent a very bad deal for the European Union. I had an economist friend that said in a very serious way, and I think he's absolutely right about that, if this deal on economic governance goes forward, we're basically laying out a freeway for the far right to grow in the European Union, because as we know, they grow with the economic and social crisis. And these new economic governance rules have economic and social crisis written all over them.
Yeah. Gusmão, thank you very much. All the best to you. Are you running again?
It's not clear. We haven't really established the list of candidates for the next elections.
Running, all the best of success, and also all the best for the coming year to you, professionally and personally. And we stay in touch, and I hope to see you soon again.
Thank you, and then see you around. And thank you. Thanks again for the invite.